I've been playing Eternal Return for almost 2.5 years now, and I managed to hit the top ranks with over 2,500 hours. I've learned a lot along the way, and the road getting there was a struggle at times, and smooth sailing at others. Like any beginner, I started off in Bronze, and spent time learning how to improve at the game. If I could go back with the information I had now, here's how I would relearn Eternal Return if I could. What's poppin' everyone, it's your boy Levi, and I'll be creating a community Discord soon where it'll be designed to help you achieve your rank goals. There'll be tips and tricks, and you'll be able to ask questions and interact with other members of the community, so stay tuned for that. Don't worry about what characters are strong or weak in the meta at the moment. All you need is a character that feels mechanically comfortable to you and you enjoy playing. You need to try and make every game that you play as consistent as possible while learning Eternal Return. If you have to focus on what different characters do while playing, it will distract you from the core concepts of the game. Every time you try a new character, you're resetting the learning process. This is mostly the same for learning any game, as you need to build on your previous knowledge. Once you're comfortable with one character, start watching your own replays. You may not know what you're doing wrong each game, and that's okay. The point of watching your own replays isn't necessarily to figure out why things went wrong, but to find out where things went wrong. As you're watching your games, write down any questions you might have. If you can remember what you were thinking about at different points in the game, write down where you felt lost and where you didn't know what to do next. For example, a point where you might write down a question is when you've just finished your build and you cleared out all the hunts in your ending zone. You still have some time before objectives spawn, but as mentioned, there's no hunts left, so what do you do? To answer this question is the next step of learning. Find a top player and watch what they do. You should be playing the same route as them, as top players will always try to find the most optimal build path for the current patch. Pay attention to what they do in the time frame of your questions. Then continue to repeat this cycle of finding questions and seeking answers. As you start to incorporate these answers into your own game, you'll not only see improvement, but this knowledge will become muscle memory and you can start to take on more information. After practicing one character and getting the hang of them, you'll start to plateau a little bit. And this can be one of the most frustrating feelings in any game. You're setting yourself up well in the early game to put yourself ahead in most games. And maybe you're even outplaying some opponents who are stronger than you. But the wins in the high kill games have slowly slowed down. This is the time to start branching out in characters. Now that you've built the foundation of how to play Eternal Return, you can apply this to every character and the learning process will be much quicker. It's likely that characters that you might not have liked in the past start to feel better. I recommend to start learning characters of similar playstyle to the one that you've learned on, but I've seen people completely switch. Take Frankie Doodle for example. Frankie is one of our best players in NA, and he started off playing Bleeder Jackie. This is arguably one of the least mechanical playstyles for one of the most simplest characters that relies mostly on ratting. He's now finding immaculate success with almost 4 accounts in the top 10 of the NA ladder with Sylvia, one of the most mechanical characters in the game. Whatever character you land on as your main, you'll have the knowledge of how various matchups want to fight your character, and you'll learn what strength and weaknesses your character has over other characters. If you play a character like Luke, you'll notice that he takes hunts pretty well. When you switch to a character like Emma, it would be much harder to take them. That's a skill that Luke has that you might have taken for granted. There's also a hidden benefit to trying out multiple characters. You'll start to learn what these other characters want to do in a fight and what they look for. Finding the difference in strengths between characters will help you identify what characters have similar playstyles. If you play Adela, you'll want to stay at far range until you can hit Queen and then follow up with a one-shot. This is very similar to how Bianca and Nathapan approach a fight. These characters also sit out of vision and look to hit one spell so that they can follow up with their combo. Then you'll notice that there's other characters that fight similarly but have a different approach, like Daniel, Alex, and Amp Yejin. To play all these characters, you don't have to be a mechanical mastermind on any of them. You just need to feel out their strengths and weaknesses, and you can probably do so in just a couple games. But you don't need to try and learn all 6 characters at a time. This is where a meta comes back into play. Not all of these characters will be meta at the same time, and as you get into the higher elos, you'll want to start playing the best characters on the current patch. This is how you develop a character pool. Please note at the time we're recording this that Eternal Return's player base is so small in NA that you don't really have to take an account of meta. But as the game becomes more and more popular, this becomes more and more important. So we established the formula. Find a character that you're comfortable with, learn the game, and then take notes of questions you have in your learning process. Find answers to those questions through better players, and when you reach the point of plateau, branch out and learn similar characters, as well as knowing what your opponent wants to do in a fight. The next thing I would do to relearn Eternal Return is then to start limit testing. Limit testing is a concept I've talked a few times on the channel about. It often gets mistaken for playing like a psychopath and taking bad plays for the sake of learning. It's rather the point where you start to mold your own game from what top players are doing, finding your own strengths and weaknesses. Every single game of Eternal Return is different, so it doesn't make sense for you to try and copy one top player's game with no adaptation. You'll need to learn different scenarios and what to do in them. To limit test, you do the same process of taking notes of questions as you play the game. But instead of researching to find the answer, you immediately do whatever you think the answer might be. If your question is, does my character fight well at alpha? You should immediately run to alpha and see if you fight well at alpha. Which battle zone does my character fight best in? Try them all out and record your results. If you're in the Berserk battle zone and you're getting one shot without putting up much of a fight back, you probably don't want to be in the Berserk zone. If you need help running down your matchup, you probably want to be in the speed zone. When you limit test, you don't want to test bad plays, but you want to be very aggressive with your testing. It's called limit testing for a reason. You're finding the limit. As your game begins to shape into something you're comfortable with, then you begin to dial it back. If you're too scared to make plays or play a passive game of ratting, you won't learn anything. Understanding Eternal Return means you're understanding how the game works. Time management is the single most important skill to learn in Eternal Return. You should never not know what you're going to do next. With squads being the main mode on release, this is both more and less important to learn. It's more important in the sense that you as a team need to know what you're doing and coordinate all three players, which is much harder than with just one. It's less important in the sense that you have two teammates that can cover for any mistakes that you might make. Everything you do in Eternal Return should work to be making yourself stronger. If there's no objective or battle zone on the map, what is the current course of action for your team? Should you be hunting animals in a zone for mastery? Should you be calling in a rare resource for important transitions? Making the most of your time should always be the top priority, and you should never be wandering aimlessly. You'll hear me say a lot in guide videos to move with purpose, and the same thing applies here. Wandering the map, not doing anything, is the only action you can do alive that doesn't provide anything to getting stronger. I've given a ton of information in this video, so I want to emphasize how important it is to break things up into one step at a time. It's going to be impossible to work on everything all at once, and there's a good chance that if you try to do that, you won't improve anywhere. There's an old saying that says, when you dig a well, you don't dig 112-inch deep holes. Are you dividing your efforts into learning every part of Eternal Return and never striking water? Stick to one concept and keep going until you hit water. Every well will be a failure until you succeed. And also work chronologically. In my How to Climb in Eternal Return video, I mentioned that it doesn't make sense to learn how to ABC a final zone if you can't make it out of the first battle zone. Review one of your games and pick the earliest point at which you feel you need to work on. Be specific and work on that until you get it. Eternal Return is a linear game, and the early game is the most consistent part. The late game will have different variations with different zones and characters being alive, but the early game is very specific to the character that you play and the route that you run. Make sure that you do the same things every game and that you're solid at it. Do I have any horror fans in my community? What's that one famous quote from The Shining?
Here's Johnny!
No, not that one. While I think this is the best way to learn Eternal Return, make sure you're making time for yourself to have fun with the game. Every so often, try out a new character, or just have a game where you try and kill the entire lobby. You'll avoid burnout if you make some room to have fun while playing the game. It's still a game, and games are meant to be fun. Unless you're someone like me who likes the learning process of getting better at games and thinks that's the fun part. Take some breaks, keep your cool, and you can't learn anything while tilted. So here's how I would relearn Eternal Return. First, I would find a character I like and work towards mastering that character. During the process, I would review my own games and take note of any questions I may have towards the game or the character. Next, I would seek out what the top players are doing for my character. I would use their replays to answer any questions that I have about the game to accelerate my learning process of Eternal Return. When I start to plateau on my character and I'm not seeing consistent results, it's time to branch out. I will learn what other characters look for in fights and learn what strengths my character has that other characters don't. Then, I would find similar characters and see if I like any of them, focusing on the strongest characters in the meta for that playstyle. Then I will start to play more and more aggressive in the playstyle, pushing the limits of my knowledge and molding my game plan into a strategy I understand and what works for me, without losing the core concepts of the game. As I get more and more feedback from my games, I'll dial it back some and play to become the most strongest version of my character at each given point of the game. This is also how I'll measure success, and I will take the focus off wins and losses. If I run into situations where I don't know what to do or I am struggling to execute different concepts, I will narrow my focus and repeatedly work on them in chronological order until I understand and overcome them. And finally, I will still continue to prioritize having fun with the game, as it will lead to tilt and burnout if my improvement starts to feel like work. If you feel like all these tips can help you, consider leaving a like and joining my Discord when it's created. You can also leave any questions you might have down below, and I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. I also do free live coaching streams where you can submit your replays and get feedback on what you can do better in games. Be sure to click or tap the screen now to be taken to a playlist with all my previous coaching videos.